European financial institutions, one would have a hard time disagreeing with those who consider the EU a purely economic endeavor or speak of Europe as a Europe that's been built in Brussels and Strasbourg as a sort of civilizing power that imposes a certain way of life on indigenous peoples, as somebody has historically said, ironically, a while ago. That's some words that now came to my mind reading the news. In a similar vein, Jürgen Habermas warned of the success of a neoliberal orthodoxy, which seemed to be achieved with the initiatives back then by Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy during the crisis. He has called for reclaiming the political creative powers on a supranational level. And he has renewed this claim only 2 weeks ago on the annual meeting of the German Legal Society, where he spoke of Monti and Papademos' confidence of the markets, and included the German Supreme Court in his critique as they had failed to correct this politics and to reclaim scope for design, the elbow room for politics. Angela Merkel has fed these doubts a couple of days later only by saying that European countries are being watched closely by the markets, and that she has to be careful to do the right thing now and to come up with a good solution that would comfort the market. So indeed the question arises, who is setting the framework for whom here? On the European level, the financial crisis overshadowed the revolts in many Arab countries, which interestingly left European politicians passive, at times helpless in their reactions, and again divided. So these issues raise the question of the underlying principles of European politics. Recent debate were less concerned with values and identity, but rather with political bodies and ways to enable the EU to deal with the still unfolding crisis. Here, Habermas aimed for strengthening of democratic institutions, has again called for speeding up the process of political integration. His ideas, however, and I mentioned that, were in sharp contrast to those of the political leaders, and he again underlined his vision of a EU Europe now that stands for an important step in the development of the cosmopolitan world domestic politics. Most often when a fostered integration is called for, it's by referring to a European identity which supposedly still is not strong enough to carry a Europe of 27. But what is it that defines Europe, that gives a hint of its identity? Why would it be relevant anyhow to define it? Postmodernists may consider Europe a telling example for the breakdown of masters and narratives. Mention, for example, the 70+ languages that are spoken here, and that the continent has always had many centers and many peripheries. Wolfgang Schmale spoke of a discourse in Europe that was a quest for historical roots that would be the consequence of a long history rather than its aim or result. In other words, once to relate this which born, the evolutionary thesis of the making of the European identity, I have it here, I think. In other words, the evolutionary thesis of the making of a European identity states a crucial long-term trend, but this trend has to be contextualized in the complex, contradictory, by no means predetermined movement of European integration. One context in which identity is of major relevance for the EU is its democratic deficit. In his smirking text, Brussels, the gentle monster, or the disenfranchisement of Europe, Hans Magnus Enzensberger holds that the democracy deficit has been understood as a chronic deficiency disease that seemingly is not easy to cure, while it had never been a medical mystery, in fact, but rather intentional policy decision. Still, the voter turnout at European Parliament elections does not seem to point to a strong interest of the people in their European representation. But these figures alone do not suffice 50%, 53% of all European citizens considered EU membership of their respective country a good thing. In 2010, and thus before the implementation of the European Stability Mechanism and subsequent actions, Europeans had more confidence in the EU with regard to handling the financial crisis than in other European international bodies. 82% even wanted the EU to play a bigger role. And these figures still hold, although the numbers are lower. If you look at the latest Eurobarometer from just September, the confidence in the EU has dropped significantly, but still there's more confidence in the EU than in national or other international bodies. And also, what I think is more significant, most Europeans do feel European. Either they feel European and then whatever their national identity is, or the other way around, or genuinely European, and that's combined, I think, 80%. And that is a success, although it's always been discussed as something that has to be worked on. But the very fact that so many Europeans are feeling European is an achievement of European integration. So, but still, I mean, Michael Butter, among others, has shown that European identity was actually unfolding, and very convincingly so, I think. Europe has been identified by easy mobility, travel, communication, currency, obviously. This feeling of Europeanness was much discussed in 2003 when the European Convention presented its draft for a European Constitution, and at the same time there was the fierce debate on an unfolding war in Iraq, going on both. Habermas and Derrida started the famous initiative that's been talked about a lot, what binds Europe together. And they did so in suggesting a definition of Europe against an other, and this other in this case was the United States. Processes of othering have a long tradition in identity politics, and also in transatlantic relations. And in this sense, the idea was not new, nor in form on content, but did it get us closer to a definition of European identity? Habermas and Derrida proposed to widen national identity so that they can encompass a European dimension. John McCormack further elaborated on the features it might entail in this discussion of Europeanness. Indeed, in 2003, Europeans seemed united in their opposition against the looming war in order to make their voices heard. There were millions that took to the streets, an estimated 1 million in Rome, 10,000 in Zagreb, 500,000 in Bonn, 500,000 in London, 2 million in Madrid, 100,000 in New York, and as Peter Esterhazy has counted, about 30 people in Budapest. So these figures point to at least two conflicting positions that were based on different experiences. Many, including Georg-August-University and others, referred to the Second World War in order to explain why they could not, quoting Fischer from his famous speech at the Munich Security Conference, he turned to Rumsfeld and said, I cannot so easily go out there and tell my people, well, let's go to war because I'm not convinced. That's my problem, he said, I'm not convinced. And on the other hand, you have the initiators, for example, of the letter of aid, who thought it was more important not to alienate the United States, who's been guaranteeing European freedom for decades. So this initiative again proved Shia Berlin right in his diagnosis of a naive craving for unity and symmetry at the expense of experience. So if that again doesn't work, doesn't bring us to any idea of a European identity, how do we deal with this situation then? One idea was the concept of a core Europe that's been mentioned by Habermas and Derrida as well. It goes